Alrighty, let's go. Welcome back into the Skooshi Sport Podcast, your live reaction for Team List Tuesday NRL Round 6, baby. Hard to believe we're nearly a quarter away through the bloody season. Literally feels like last week we were just talking about Vegas Team List Tuesday. It is wild how fast it goes, but very interesting Team List Tuesday coming up because we've got a few teams that are facing few injuries, particularly big injuries like your Broncos. Then we've got someone like the Dragons that could potentially be facing a couple shuffle changes just for the sake of them being 0-5. Maybe the Warriors, my Warriors as well. They're very, very interesting. Also, we had a few injuries over the weekend, so just very interesting to see where teams are lining up for this round, especially obviously coming off the long weekend as well. Roosters had the bye over the past week, so now they come back. They play the Sharkies in Perth this week. But before we get stuck in, make sure you give it a massive like and subscribe also to the channel, all my socials as well. Give them a follow. They're all in the bio there. All right, let's get stuck into it. Bulldogs and the Panthers on Thursday night. Panthers 5-0, looking bloody unstoppable against the Doggies here on Thursday. As always, start with the home team. So at fullback, we've got Connor Tracy. On your wings, we've got Jacob Kiraz and Marcelo Montoya. In your centres, we've got Anari Tawala, and stepping in for Stephen Crichton is Bronson Sherry there on that left centre. So not too much of a change because they're pretty used to that. Matt Byrne and Lockie Galvin in the halves still. In your forwards, we've got Max King and Sammy Hughes and Bailey Hayward in your number 9 there. William kick out, Jacob Preston on your edges, and then Jamin Salmon there at lock. And on your bench, Kurt Mann, Satili Tupinel, Harry Hayes, Sean O'Sullivan, Jake Turpin makes his return, and Lipoi Hopoi is there as well. Not too many massive surprises. I think most people probably expected Bronson Sherry to step into that left centre role for Crichton. Not sure who's going to be the captain for the Doggies this week. I would assume it's going to be Matt Burton. I could be wrong though. But nevertheless, huge loss for the Bulldogs, losing their ex-Panther and also their captain for this team, Stephen Crichton, with a shoulder injury. I believe he's out about 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. I think Mitch Woods is back, going to be back from injury around 8 sort of marks. So I'm very, very interested to see what they do. But I didn't think their attack looked that bad last week before the credit injury there with Burden and Galvin in the halves. For the Panthers, I'd say this is going to be pretty unchanged apart from the number 9. But at fullback, Dylan Edwards on your wing. The Milky Bar, 12 tries in 5 games. Thomas Jenkins and Brian To'o. Paul Alamotti and Casey McLean in your centres. In your halves, you've got Blaze Talangi and Nathan Cleary there. Up front, Moses Leota and Lindsay Smith. Mitch Kennedy makes his return back from suspension. On your edges, we've got Isaiah Papali and Liam Martin. And then at lock, we've got Isaiah Yeo. On your bench, Jack Colger, Billy Phillips, Scott Sorensen, Luke Garner, Isaac Tongo, and Freddie Lussick. Yeah, nothing too major at all. I said the one change from the big 50-point rubbing last week of the Storm is just Mitch Kenny back in for Freddie Lussick, who was awesome last week, by the way. But yeah, Panthers going in unchanged. I expect them to win well in this one here. Yeah, you can say Bulldogs finals revenge from last year, but I think finals revenge from last year is 0-2 at the moment, off the top of my head. 1-3. I know Panthers beat the Broncos in round 1, but I know the Sharkies went and beat the Rays again. And I think there's been another matchup as well that hasn't gone as well. All right, Friday afternoon or Friday evening football, 6 o'clock down there. Dragons and the Seagulls from Wollongong. For the Dragons, let's see how they're lining up. I know there's going to be some changes. We've got Tyrell Sloan at fullback. Now, I don't know. Apparently, Gutho's injured. But I've heard rumors he's going to get dropped anyway. They're looking at potentially getting Trey Fuller immediately, asking for a release from the Dolphins. I've heard Drinky has got rumored there to go there as well. Very interesting. On your wings, Christian Tuipulotu and Seti 2 makes his return. David Farley is facing a suspension either 1 or 2 weeks. Moses Sully, Val Holmes in the centres. In your halves, I brought Carl Flanagan back a little bit earlier from that really bad concussion against the Titans, and they put him in the 7 role and Dan Atkinson in the 6. Now, this is what everyone was calling for. Everyone literally knew, apart from Shane Flanagan, to put Dan Atkinson at 6 and Carl Flanagan at 7. Sounds weird, but this could do the Dragons absolute wonders because Dan Atkinson is a flat at 6. He knows how to run the ball. He is not a game that can game manage and just kick and kick and kick because he's been doing that the first 5 weeks and it's worked horribly. Kyle Flanagan is that type of guy. He's not a guy that's going to be running the ball too much. He can just kick his way to good spots for the Dragons and try and manage the game a bit better. Let Daniel Atkinson run off the cuff. Let him be like a really good, strong running six, which is what he was when he came in for the Sharkies, like here and there. So finally made the right move here. Instead of, apparently they're going to drop Dan Atkinson, that kind of thing. But they've definitely made the right call here. Kyle Flanagan is a 7. Dan Atkinson is a 6 every day of the week. Up front, Emre Gula and Toby Couchman. Damien Cook is your starting 9. On the edges, Luciano Lua, who was the best by far for the Dragons last week in a losing effort, and Jaden Sewer. Hamish Short there at lock. On your bench, you've got Jake Little, Blake Laurie, Jacob Halangahu, Josh Kerr, Haim Saleh, and Cade Reed, who, young fella coming through New South Wales Cup, absolutely blitzed it in the first trial and the second trial, I think, as well, at the start of the year. And so, yeah, no signs of LKTs there on the reserves. And then you got Pacifici Tonga there, and then also Matt Thine. Obviously, very good to see. I like what they've done here with switching the halves. Maybe they've brought back Flanagan a week earlier than they should, but they just made the right call this week and for the foreseeable future, I think, as well. See how Sloan goes at fullback. We've obviously been here before with Sloan. I'd love him to take his opportunity, take advantage of his opportunity. I'm not sure how long Clint Gustin is out for. Just very intrigued to see how he does go at fullback, and obviously Setu back there for Farley. All right, for Manly, wouldn't expect this to be too changed from there. Again, drubbing of the Dolphins last week. At fullback, Tommy Turbo. Katsu HA last week, all good to play this week. On your wings, Jason Saab returns back from suspension. Got Lehigh Hapawate. On your centers, Tolata Kola and Ruben Garrick. In your halves, Luke Brooks and Jamal Fogarty. Up front, we got Tanela Paseka and Kobe Henderson. Starting at 9, Brandon Wakeham still. On your edges, Hamala Olakawatu and Ben Travojevic, coming off a career best game, in my opinion. And Jake Travojevic in there at lock. On your bench, Jake Simpkin, Corey Waddell, Ethan Bullymore, Simi Lafai, Paul Bryant, and Clayton Faulolo. Yeah, not too many massive surprises here for Manly. As I said, what would you change really from last week unless there's injuries? Only main change, as expected, is Jason Saab back in for Clayton Faulolo off that suspension. I mean, if they play anything like last week, Manly did. If they play anything like last week, the Dragons did, it's going to be another 50-point game, honestly, because the Dragons have not been playing well at all. But is this the game where potentially if Dragons lose, that Shane Flanagan gets a sack? Potentially. Is this a game where they're going to finally get up for it? We'll see, man, because that home crowd was bloody pissed off last week at Cogra. No, go back to Wollongong. Very, very intrigued to see how the Dragons bounce back in this one here. All right, Broncos and the Cowboys, Queensland Derby from Suncorp Stadium. Friday night, obviously cluster of injuries for the Broncos here in this one. But at fullback, we've got Jesse Arthurs filling in for Reece Walsh. On your wings, Josiah Karapani makes his return back from his little week off. Dean Mariner on the other wing. In your centres, unchanged, Kashoni Staggs and Shibasaki. In your halves, we've got Ezra Mem. Anna Reynolds has been named. Now, I was not expecting Reynolds to be named. That is quite a shock to me. I heard he is definitely going to be out. I'd be shocked if he plays because it sounds like he's got a groin injury. I don't see him any point in playing whatsoever for mine. I think Tom Duffy will be there. Corey Jensen and Payne Haas up front there. Corey Pakes will be in the 9 role, therefore will probably play a lot of minutes with Ben Hunt out. On your edges, Brendan Piacura and Jordan Ricky, and then Paddy Carrigan there at lock. On your bench, we've got Blake Moser, Xavier Willison, Ben Tolte, All Blacks Taffa, Thomas Duffy, and Hayes Perham. Now, they've got obviously Hayes Perham there for a bit of cover there at the back if Jesse Arthurs or a winger does go down. And then they've got Tom Duffy there on the bench for Adam Reynolds. I'll be very, very surprised if Adam Reynolds ends up playing. I would say Tom Duffy ends up starting, Adam Reynolds goes out, and then Josh Rogers ends up coming onto the bench there. But obviously a few little changes there for the Broncos. Necessary changes. Will I think they'll be okay? Yeah, I actually do think they'll actually be okay in this one here. For the Cowboys, I'd say pretty unchanged in this one here, coming off a good win last week against the Dragons. Scott Drinkwater at fullback. On your wings, Brandon Burns and Murray Taulagi, Jackson Purdue and Tom Chester in your centres. We've got Jakey Clifford and Tommy Dillon in your halves here. Colin Hess and Jason Tamalolo up front. Reedy Marnie starting there at hooker. Helium Lukey and Kai O'Donnell there on the edges. Now, Sam McIntyre I think he got injury to HIA last week, so that is a necessary change. And then Ruben Cotter there at lock. On your bench, Sonny Luke, Griffin Neem, Thomas McHaley, Matt Lodge, Zach Labour, and then Mason Barber. Now, Mason Barber is quite talented, although can't see him getting any game time, unfortunately. But yeah, pretty unchanged. Obviously, the one necessary change of Kai O'Donnell coming in for Sam McIntyre there. As I said, either got a HIA or injury last week. I just don't quite remember off the top of my head. Should be a good game, this one. I'm very interested to see how the Broncos go without Walsh, Hunt, and potentially Reynolds. Was not expecting Reynolds to get named there whatsoever. All right, Saturday afternoon football, Super Saturday, Rabbitohs and the Raiders from Optus Stadium in Perth. We've got the double header here. So for the Rabbitohs, Jai Gray at fullback, we've got AJ and Campbell Graham there on the wings. In your centres, Latrell Mitchell and Jackie Whiten. In your halves, Cody Walker and Jamie Humphreys. Starting up front, Tavita Totola and Keon Kolomatangi. It sounds like, well, I did hear Kolomatangi did not train yesterday. I'm not sure if he trained today. He's obviously battling that. I think it's an MCL or PCL injury, which sounds like it's happened from preseason. Got banged up last week, but in the first few minutes, managed to play on, put in a strong effort. So interesting to see if he ends up playing. And then we've got Cheese making his first start of the season, his first game for the Red and Myrtle as well of South Sydney. Be very, very intrigued to see how Cheese goes in this attack here. On your edges, David Fafita and Talis Duncan, and then Cam Murray at lock. On your bench, Mamazelos, Lockie Hubner, Sean Kepi, Liam LeBlanc, Bronson Garlick, and Jaden Sullivan. Wow, just running with like a 3-forward bench. It's very interesting for South. I'm very intrigued to see the minutes that happens there, because if they've named just 3 forwards there, that would tell me that Keon Kolomatangi is probably okay then, I guess. They think he's probably going to manage to get through the game. Very interesting. Obviously, good to see Brandon Smith getting his first start to the year as well, coming off that calf injury. Happened in preseason. Obviously, played a trial against Manly, and then he's been out ever since. All right, for the Raiders, let's see if they make any changes here. Starting the season 1-4, 4 losses in a row. K Weeks at fullback. Tamale and Jed Stewart there in the wings there. Obviously, Xavier Savage got injured on the weekend. Simi Sasangi still there in the centres. He's been one of the best. Do not get me wrong. But I just thought Matt Timoko may have come back, potentially, because they just need to make a change somewhere. Seb Chris in there in the other centres. In your half, Ethan Sanders and Ethan Strange. Up front, Josh Papali'i and Joe Tarpany. Tom Starling starting at 9. Hudson Young and Noel Martin there on the edges. And Corey Horsepress starting at 13. On your bench, Jaden Bradley, Zach Hosking, Adam Mariota, Morgan Smithies, Dane Laurie, and Joe Roddy. No, Matt Timoko isn't even on the bench. Sticky is not making any changes to this team whatsoever unless necessary. He's not made any healthy changes to this team, which I find very, very surprising, right? They're 1-4. They've lost 4, and then 1 wins against Manly, who were bad in round 1. That was a 14-point comeback. I just thought they would have made some form of change. I'm very, very surprised by this by Ricky Stewart. Interesting to see if there's any late changes to that one there. Second game of the day, coming to the second game from Perth doubleheader. Sharkies and the Roosters. Probably game of the week for mine. This game should be an absolute cracker. Very, very keen for it. For the Sharkies, coming for a good win against the Wars last week. Will Kennedy at fullback, Katoa and Samuel Strange on the wings. Maween Hiroti comes in for Jesse Ramian and KL Iro. I think Ramian's out for 4 to 6 weeks off the top of my head. In your halves, Brayden Trindle and Nico Hines coming in for a great game last week. Absolutely destroyed us. Up front, AFB and Toby Rudolph. Blake Brayley there, hooker. On your edges, we've got Billy Burns and Teague Wilton. So still no sign of Britton Nickora starting, which I actually agree with, because I think Billy Burns has been awesome, to be honest. Jesse Colquhoun starting there at lock. Now, Sharkies have got the bye next week, so I'm very intrigued. Is this the last game for Jesse Colquhoun starting before Cam McInnes comes back? Very, very intrigued. On your bench, Brendan Nickora, Sifa Talakai, Oregon Kathusi, Tommy Hazelton, Hohepa Peru, and Tuku Hai Tapua. No mass surprising changes. You don't ever really see that from the Sharkies. I think they've made like one surprising change in the last 5 years under Fitzy. Just a necessary change of Hiroti in for Jesse Ramian. I said Jesse Ramian out for about 4 to 6 weeks from what I know. For the Roosters, James Tedesco at fullback there. On your wings, Daniel Tupou, Mark Nwanga, Nitawase. In your centres, Hugo Savala. So no sign of Billy Smith. I think he got injured in their last game against Manly. Hugo Savala. Wow, unless he's been a centre in New South Wales Cup, I did not expect to see that coming. Bobby Toy there in your other centre. Very surprised by Hugo Savala there. I just would have thought that maybe put Junior Palga there or something. In your halves, DC and Sammy Walker. Up front, you got Naf White and Lindsay Collins. Reece Robson starting there at hooker. On your edges, Angus Crichton and Siwa Wong. And then you got Victor Radley making his return from his 7-game suspension, I think it was. Making his return, starting there at lock. Now, there were rumors that he may start on the right edge. We saw photos of him preseason wearing the number 12, but he's coming in, starting there at lock. On your bench, Connor Watson, Spencer Lenu, Nat Butcher, Feketi, Cody Ramsey, and Tommy Tallout. Interesting as well. Just 3 forwards, kind of 2.5 forwards, I guess, for the Roosters. I guess Reece Robson can play 80. 3 forward bench there for the Roosters. So very interesting there. Once again, obviously, they must think Victor Radley's looking pretty fit. Obviously, Angus Crichton will play 80. So Wong will play 80 as well. And then just a rotation of Naf White and Lindsay Collins. Still very surprised by Hugo Savala at centre. I'm very intrigued to see if that actually does end up happening where they put Cody Ramsey in there. They've got no one on the reserve. Like, they've got Blake Steep and Egan Butcher there on the reserve. That shows how stacked their team is. I'm interested to see if that actually does happen because Hugo Savala will be on the left side, so the right side, Hiroti and Katoa. That's a very interesting matchup, especially with Nico on that side there as well. One to look out for, just one to watch for the Roosters coming into Saturday. Saturday night, one I'm very scared of, Storm and the Warriors coming to you from Melbourne. Storm coming off a 50-point drubbing, conceding against Penrith. 3 losses in a row, Warriors 2 losses in a row. For the Storm, Tuafalogo at the back, Will Warbrick and Moses Leo on the wing there for the Storm, making his return from that delayed concussion. Jackie Howarth and Nick Meaney there in the centres. Cam Munster and Jerome Hughes there in the halves there. Up front, we got Uto Okamanu and Josh King. Harry Grant staying there at hooker. On your edges, we got Joe Chant and Cooper Clark making his start. You absolutely love to see it. I love the effort plays from Cooper Clark last week, despite the loss. Big prodigy. Big prodigy, Cooper Clark. Really like what I'm seeing. I would say Lasardi is 1 to 2 weeks away, so still no sign of Sean Bloor and what's happening with him. Trent Liero starting there at lock. On your bench, we've got Tyron Wishart, Alec McDonald, Jack Hetherington, Davin Wiley, Violet Poo, and Binair White-Terry. As I said, still no sign of Sean Bloor anywhere to be seen, which I find very interesting. But Moses Leo comes back for, I think it was Tumalatu Brown. He got pretty much destroyed last week, unfortunately, on that edge. Just one that changed there. Nick Meaney stays in the centre there. He's a better centre than winger for mine there. But yeah, not too many changes. Good to see Cooper Clark getting the start, though, on that edge. All right, for the Waz, Tane Tuapiki still at fullback there. On your wings, DWZ off a hat-trick last week in RTS. In your centres, still sticking the same. We've got Chance, Nicole Kluksa, and Adam Pompey. Now, Chance obviously got destroyed in centre last week. Hopefully he gets better defensively. Otherwise, it could be a long night. And Adam Pompey is facing a 1 to 2 week suspension, although we are contesting it. I hope we get off because that is a bullshit suspension. Absolute bullshit. He did absolutely nothing wrong with it. In my opinion, Britton Nicker was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. In your half, CHT comes back for an injured Luke Metcalf, who was out for 2 to 3 weeks. Tanner Boyd there in the 7. In your front row, James Fisher-Harris and Jackson Ford. Wade Egan starting there at 9. Leka Halasima and Jacob Laban there starting on the edge. So still no sign of Kurt Capel yet, unless he's on the bench. He must be very close, though. Aaron Clark starting there at lock. On your bench, Sam Healy, Murata Nirakore, Dimitri Valmunga, Tanis Dallas-Smith, Eddie Iremia Toyava, and Luke Hanson there as well. So still got Leitao, Morgan Gannon, AKP there in the reserves. Okay. Look, it's been 2 matches with this new changes with Tane at fullback and CNK in the centres. If we lose this one or it looks a disaster, I think we do need to look at changing it again. Very happy CHT is back in the starting squad. Where that's come through injury, doesn't matter. I really like CHT and what he did in the first couple of rounds for us. See how we bounce back, right? Like we've had two pretty bad losses in a row. Defense has been very, very leaky. Just need to bounce back, man. Big, big game. Storm, we've well fired up for this one. 3 losses in a row, including conceding 50 last week, which I haven't seen since I was 3 years old, which is wild to think about. All right, Sunday afternoon footy, Eels and the Titans, 2 o'clock this one from CommBank. Obviously a few injuries for the Eels in this one here. For the Eels, Josh Papali'i remains at fullback. On the wings, we got Araz and Nunva, who I've never heard of, unfortunately, so sorry to him. And the Fox on the other wing, Will Penasini makes his return, and Brian Kelly in the other centres. In your halves, Ronnie Volkman, you love to see it, love a bit of Ronnie, and Mitch Moses there in the halves. You also got Jackie Williams and Junior Barlow at front starting, Riley Smith starting at hooker, Kelma Tuolangi and Kitiana Katoga there on the edges, and Dylan Walker starting there at lock. On your bench, Challenger Silva, Charlie Geimer, Sam Tuivati, Luca Moretti, Jack DeBellin finally there on the bench, and Tiancum Brown, who I haven't heard of, unfortunately, either. Now, the one big change, obviously, is Araz Nunva must be making his debut, surely, for Bailey Simonson there, who is gone for the season. Will Penasini makes his return for Sean Russell, who I think got a HIA or injury. I wasn't really watching that game fully, so I don't know what happened, sorry. And then we got Ronnie Volkman in for Jonah Pezzett, who suffered a hammy injury last week as well. Not too sure how long he is out for, though, but we'll obviously keep you up to date. For the Titans, Keanu Keeney at fullback there, Fine Marnie and Philip Sammy there on the wings. Got something stuck in my eye. Brilliant. Jojo Fafita and AJ Brimson there in the centres. In your halves, Lockie Ilias and Jaden Campbell there. Starting up front, Cleese Haas and Tina Fa'asul Malawi. And then Sam Verrill starting there at hooker. On your edges, Aaron Mahal and Bo Fermont, and then Chris Fernall starting there at lock. So pretty unchanged so far for the Titans. On the bench, Curtis Morin, Cooper Bai, Mo Fodawaker, Olive Pascoe, Jalen DeGroot, and Jet Liu. Pretty unchanged there, I believe, from the Titans. I think Max Fine was on the bench somewhere, so I think he's just out for Jalen DeGroot, but no big changes. I think interesting game, this one. It's one that obviously Eagles are facing a few injuries. You've got, Volkman is coming into the halves there. Interesting to see how that sort of all goes there. I maybe thought I'd put Twiddle there, but he's not a natural winger. He's generally a fullback or a half, so I can understand that. And I said no changes there for the Titans. All right, last game of the week, Tigers and the Knights from Campbelltown. This one should be an absolute cracker as well. Top four match. Who would have thought? For the Tigers, Dream Bullet at fullback. You got Falatino, Tavana, and Gerald Skelton there on the wing. So no Luke Laulili. Not sure if he got suspended or what happened with Laulili. In your centres, Sania Taruva and Hamasi Makasini. Now, I thought Staffatoa may be back this week, so I'm not sure if he's playing New South Wales Cup or he's just back next week. Jock Mannon and Adam Dewey there in the halves. Up front, we've got Terrell May and Fanua Bolo. Api Coruscant, captain and starting hooker. On the edges, being on fire, these two, Samuel Afanu and KPP. Alex Twalt as well on fire, starting at lock. On your bench, we've got Lachi Finu, Sione Finu, Royce Hunt, Alex Safar, Tristan Hope, and Patrick Herbert. So yeah, still no sign of Staffatoa there. Sounds like he must be coming back next week from injury. And then Jerome Luai can't be too far away. And then Taylor May also can't be too far away as well from his shoulder injury. For the Knights, Fletcher Hunt remains at fullback. Kalen Ponga back in a few weeks, I believe. On your wings, Dom Young and Greg Marzu. In your centres, you've got Dane Gaga and Wilson DeCourcy, who is in for Bradman Best, who is out for about 4 to 6 weeks with I think it's a groin injury, I believe, off the top of my head. In your halves, Fletcher Sharp and Sandon Smith. Out front, Jake Saifidi and Trey Mooney. Phoenix Crossland, the absolute warrior, starting there at number 9. On your edges, Dylan Lucas and Jermaine McEwen. Then Matty Croker starting there at lock. On your bench, Harrison Graham, Tyson Frizzell, Pasami Solo, Thomas Kant, Tyson Gamble, and Cody Hopwood there. No massive surprises. I maybe thought Thomas Kant might come into that center role there. I haven't heard too much about Wilson DeCourcy, which I do apologize for. But otherwise, no massive surprises. I think Dylan Brown is back next week for Newcastle. This should be an absolute cracker match. So Knights are 4-1. You got the Tigers there at 3-1 at the moment. This should be an absolute cracker of a match. Very much looking forward to it. But That'll do it for me, guys. There's your live reaction to TLT for round 6. Necessary changes happen. No massive like changes into outings or droppings, that sort of thing there. Probably my biggest surprise is literally Hugo Savala starting there in the center there for a guy like Junior Palga there. And then I'm very intrigued to see how this new Dragons halves combo goes with Flanagan at 7 and Atkinson at 6, and then Sloan at 1 there as well. But let me know in the comments, what was your take from TLT? Did you expect someone else to start? Just general, give me your thoughts on TLT from round 6. But that'll do it for me, guys. I'll have literally a Supercoach review coming out from round 5 probably tomorrow morning when you're listening to this. Obviously, there's been such a mess around with like Easter Monday, that sort of thing. Really just mess the schedule around. I'll have trade room preview for round 6 coming up on Thursday morning here as well. PS, it's an absolute clusterfuck of a round for me with injuries all over the place. That'll do it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and cheers.